Ho 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 ho! What you say there, buddy? Huh? Can we hear that one more time for the audience?
So maybe not as bad as hearing Reg's name being said in the subversion.
Listen, ever since I watched the CJ the Champ video on Doflamingo, I'm certified locked into One Piece. Okay, I've convinced my girlfriend to watch it with me. Okay, so we are going to grow old together watching that. But then I started to think, like, who is the most evil villain of all time in anime? Okay, so what did I do? I hopped on YouTube, typed in most evil villain in anime, and this is the first video that popped up, the most vile villain ever in anime and manga. Now, I'm not a manga reader. Forget that. Who got time for that, bro? We dub only, bro. Hit the dislike button if you want. I'm gonna come fight you. Let's get it. A prayer cannot be born. Oh, see, look at me trying to showboat. A prayer cannot be born of one who only knows of joy. That's a banger right there.
I want you to imagine for a moment that you were abducted as a child. You were thrown into a human-sized container and lowered with someone else in the container next to you. Once you both hit bottom, both containers are raised rapidly. You see the person next to you take on a different appearance, but you, on the other hand, decompose painfully. You scream, it hurts over and over as your flesh melts on your bones, and you become a puddle of skin and organs writhing in pain, but still alive. Now imagine if I told you that doesn't even come close to capturing the full image of the person responsible for this. There are a few candidates worthy of the title of most vile villain in anime and manga. Shout out to Mullet Man for giving the blessing for the video, but those candidates would be Shiro from Blade of the Immortal, Kakihara from Ichi the Killer, Seiko from Blood on the Tracks, and of course Griffith from Berserk. I want to delve
I gotta do Berserk too, bro.
into this idea of vile, however, since it's an interesting thought on why we see characters like these as the most vile, instead of ones that from a number standpoint have done a lot more damage in their respective worlds. For example, someone like Frieza from Dragon Ball or any other mass murdering maniac.
Freaking Light Yagami? Man was out here. You're dead.
Why do we see certain villains in a far more negative light than others, despite the damage they do being relatively less? A book I read called The Anatomy of Evil, written by Michael H. Stone, gives an interesting point on what causes us to have a visceral reaction to certain things. Very early on in the book, he gives an example of a case where a man under the influence of drugs shot 3 people. 2 lived and 1 died. But one of the survivors had been blinded in both eyes and had just gotten married last week. The jury showed a strong reaction to what happened to the blinded man, even more than the man who had actually been killed. Why is that? In the previous paragraph, the book says, quote, ironically, certain crimes amounting to less murder will be experienced as more clearly evil than murder itself.
Bro, listen. I don't know who's watching this, but if you're familiar with the hip-hop community, there is a rapper, right, who firearm went off, hit somebody in a place of their body, they survived, okay? The whole world said, get rid of him, throw him in jail. Rightfully, well, okay, you know, do the time for your crime type beat. But those same people said, yo, that new King Von, you know, it was banging, you know what I'm saying? That's all I gotta say. He might be spitting right now.
Because of the suffering involved, coupled with our very human tendency to identify with the victim and to imagine how the crime would have affected us had we been the victim. I think this portion is very telling of how we perceive stories told to us, like if we were a jury judging these characters. Hence why characters that from a pure numbers view are more evil, we don't really throw them up there when talking about vile. I seriously doubt any of us cringed physically when Planet Vegeta was being blown to smithereens. The names I listed earlier, on the other hand, are seen as some of the most disgusting and incomprehensibly evil individuals. I would like to talk about who I think could be the most vile villain in anime and manga, despite only being around for 10 chapters in the manga, or in anime form, 1 film. Bondrewd, the Sovereign of the Dawn from Made in Abyss. Made in Abyss is an ongoing series that started in 2012 and suffers from hiatus, and so it seems to have a low chapter count at 67, but each chapter I think is very efficient in moving the story forward. I bring this up because despite only being around in present time for 9 to 10 chapters, technically starting at chapter 29, the story does a really good job of getting the most out of his peculiar personality and horrendous actions. Bondrewd is mentioned back in chapter 15 as one of the White Whistles, individuals known to be the best cave raiders. people who traverse the extremely dangerous layers of the abyss. The first white whistle we meet is Ozin the Immovable, someone of supreme strength and a horrifyingly cold and blunt personality who explains the dangers of traversing the lower layers to Reg and Rico, the two primary characters of the story. She is stated to be unrivaled in physical strength amongst the white whistles, and given what we know of her, it is safe to say her words carry weight and credibility. This is important for context because as she lists the dangers of the abyss and the white whistles who are in the lower layers, she singles out Bondrewd. Even so, you should do your best not to stay in the 5th layer for long. Reg asks why that is, and Ozin responds so that you don't bump into any of the other white whistles. The depth's 5th layer, the Sea of Corpses, is as deep as humans can go and return alive. I suppose some of them are there. Those who are down in the abyss right now are the Sovereign of Guidance, Wakuna the Chosen, the Sovereign of Mystery, Shraja the Mysterious, the Sovereign of Dawn, Bondrewd the Novel. Among them, Bondrewd in particular is an out-and-out scoundrel. He's not kind like I am, so you better be careful. Mind you, at this point, this is coming from the character that just beat Reg damn near within an inch of his life to prove a point. It's always an effective thing to have other characters speak on an antagonist and build up the reputation of that character, and then we see said antagonist confirm the fears through their actions. If the character is pompous and full of themselves, then it's no surprise if the villain sort of hypes themselves up, but when trying to build up a character that isn't going to be present for a bit, I really do think it's a simple but powerful method of adding weight to
It's like an eerie feeling that you're gonna run into something that's gonna be like a big boss, right?
that character. Ozin
Like they built up Sephiroth. Look, I know. Holla, you always bring up Final Fantasy VII, of course. Great cinema, all right?
being the communicator of said information isn't shown to be a dishonest individual. If anything, she can be faulted for being too honest. But in this context, she has seen the terrors of the abyss and has been affected by it, and is now warning these two who want to venture into its depths. I didn't catch this at first, but since it's one of the only descriptions we get of Bondrewd before meeting him, I looked into the definition of scoundrel since I believe that word was used intentionally, at least in translation. A dishonest and unscrupulous person, a rogue. And unscrupulous is defined as having or showing no moral principles, not honest or fair. In retrospect, scoundrel is without a doubt the perfect word to describe Bondrewd. Someone who you cannot let your guard down around. An untrustworthy individual who has no conscience, is unethical, immoral, or the more appropriate word would actually be amoral. This is the portrait painted to us about Bondrewd, and how foreign parents describe their children when they grow their hair out. I do have a bad habit when it comes to overdoing the intros of these videos. I don't know if there's something that can help with that, but I do know of something that can help with other bad habits you might have, as well as help me justify the amount of time and money I put into the new channel aesthetic. A smooth alternative that is the sponsor of today's video, Fume. Fume is a non-electronic, no-vapor device that draws flavor to your mouth. It's pretty simple, really. Flavored air. No nicotine or toxic flavors, with an award-winning design that is backed by doctors and third-party research to
Oh no, they might be spitting right now. Hold on.
help you transition out of or possibly replace bad habits. No vaping at all. Just good flavors like the raspberry lemon or my personal favorite, black licorice. With over 300,000 customers, you can be the next Fume helps out. So go check out the link in the description.
Look, I don't vape, you know what I'm saying? But like this sounds like a good idea, okay? You know what I'm saying? For those who need the help.
Description below, or scan the QR code and use code MASS to get your free magnetic Fume base when you order the Journey Pack. And thank you to Fume for sponsoring today's video. The next time we get a look into Bondrewd is through the perspective of Nanachi, the third primary character of the story who clearly has ties to Bondrewd, a flashback scene where he praises her for the new cartridge and tells her to smile since the experiment was a success. So despite him, again, really only being around and active for 10 chapters, he's given a healthy amount of build-up and is directly responsible for the most infamous scene in the entire series, really one of the most unsettling and brutal scenes in anime as a whole. During this flashback scene, we see how Nanachi went from a normal girl to having the form she does now, as Bondrewd took a bunch of children to use as experiments. Brave children who do not falter even at the prospect of setting foot inside the chasm. Please take a step forward. From there, we see what his base of operations looks like, and how Nanachi and Midi, another girl that was taken in by Bondrewd, become close friends. Midi is taken to be experimented on, and this is where we overhear a conversation between Bondrewd and one of his assistants, since Nanachi is trying to follow where Midi was taken. He is reprimanded for bringing children who will never be able to return, and that from a humanitarian perspective, this is just wrong. Bondrewd is quick to respond and says there's no need to worry since he's not making use of them as humans. Nanachi is also captured and placed in a large container next to Midi, and that's when we get to see Bondrewd's motive. The 6 layers curse, death or loss of one's humanity. I'd sure like to do something about it. Those chambers you are in are capable of forcing the curse all to one side. Attempts that paired a person with something besides a fellow human didn't go well. However, Nanachi just happened to come join us.
Bro, you got a 50-50 chance for your life to could become complete misery or restoring your humanity, bro. Ain't no way I'm getting in that machine. He gonna have to kill me before I get in there.
I regret having to use...
Okay, let's say you were on the 6th level, though. Are y'all going to take the chance and go through there, or are you going to remain on the 6th level with no humanity? Yo, leave me down here, dog.
Use 2 adorable little...
That is nuts. Hold on. Headphones came out.
being such as yourselves, but as you two are such close friends, I'm sure this shall be a success. Mitty says they were tricked, and Bondrewd tells them that thanks to all of them, the darkness shall be driven out of this chasm. They weren't tricked. And so he lowers both of them, and as the containers are then raised, Nanachi transforms, and Mitty, well... Made in Abyss is a series with some of the best world building ever mixed in with a disturbing presentation. It's like I would like to recommend this to the homies, but that ain't happening. And that ain't even getting into the stupid ass bonus pages the author puts in the manga, but that's nor here nor there. Mitty isn't even given the liberty of death, but instead is near impossible to kill and is now forced to live and suffer as this thing crawling around on the ground. With Nanachi now hoping Reg can put an end to her suffering, and in a heartbreaking scene when Mitty is finally put out of her misery, we see Bondrewd see Mitty's life signal turn off and congratulates as well as thanks Nanachi for getting it done. For a brief moment we get a glimpse of the other aspect of Bondrewd that makes him terrifying beyond just seeming to be 10 steps ahead and morally reprehensible for science. At this point in the story, Bondrewd does seem to fall under the typical mad scientist, someone willing to do wrong for the greater good and the progress of humanity, or himself, with no care for his subjects, but that would be a huge miss on what Bondrewd is as a whole and what makes him uniquely twisted. When the trio finally make it to the 5th layer, they encounter one of Bondrewd's umbral hands, a member of his cave raiding squad who tells them that the Sovereign of Dawn is awaiting their arrival. Upon arriving at the Edo front, Bondrewd's base for operations, they are greeted by a girl asking if they are Papa's guests. Nanachi warns Reg and Rico, however, to be very careful with what they say, to choose their words carefully and to provoke the others into talking, because information is power. A very appropriate saying given the situation, but also an apt description of Bondrewd. The conversation between the girl and the crew is interrupted when he finally enters the scene and presents himself alongside his umbral hands, Bondrewd in the flesh. He once again congratulates Nanachi for putting Mitty out of her misery. And when I first read this in the manga, I feel
like their masks are low-key like kind of like Squid Games, but the drip is tough. I might have to have a Halloween costume candidate right now.
With a sarcastic tone, sort of instigating, but the film really adds clarity to Bondrewd's personality, especially his sincerity. Oddly enough, as shit will start hitting the fan a lot, Bondrewd doesn't show sadness, doesn't seem to show any anger or resentment, or even display the sadistic pleasure one would associate with this type of mad scientist character. But if not, his tone is constantly upbeat, joyful, caring, and at no point do we see him with a different tone behind closed doors to indicate that isn't how he genuinely is. Because up to this point, one could write off Bondrewd as the typical crazy science man again, one who belittles those who do not understand his research and a goal for the greater good, but we are soon to see that Bondrewd can't be as easily boxed in like that. A little bit of time passes and Reg and Nanachi are nowhere to be found, and Prushka saves Rico from climbing up the forbidden steps on her own. Rico asks Prushka what kind of person Bondrewd is in her eyes. Prushka responds with, "My papa's the best. He's always thinking of me."
Yeah. But he never putting you in that machine, though, buddy.
This is such a strange thing to hear, given how the first scene we see Bondrewd in for an extended period of time is him showing no issue and sacrificing a little girl, but at the same time he is capable of raising a child who sees him as the best father she could have. But the next scene gives us a good look into Bondrewd and the way he sees things. We see that Nanachi is with Bondrewd and shows surprise at him having a daughter. He states their blood relationship is weak, but she is his daughter. When questioned about that, he elaborates further. Is what they call family restricted merely to those related by blood? I do not believe that to be so.
Bro, there's no way he took somebody else's daughter and said, you know what? You my daughter. It better be like his niece or something.
Having souls that love each other is what makes
What?
people family. Blood just helps in that regard. Love. It's a matter of love, Nanachi. I'll get back to this. Nanachi agrees to help Bondrewd again as long as Reg and Rico aren't harmed, and Bondrewd apologizes saying it's too late. And then we see Reg being brutally experimented on, as his arm is severed before being stopped by Nanachi, Prushka, and Rico. The scene where Reg gets experimented on is pretty bad in the manga, but it's even worse in the movie, although maybe not as bad as hearing Reg's name being said in the sub version.
Ho 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 ho! What you say there, buddy? Huh? Can we hear that one more time for the audience?
Though maybe not as bad as hearing Reg's name being said in the sub version.
Yo, where the voice actors at, man? I just wanna talk to them. You know what I'm saying? I wanna ask them a couple questions. Okay. Not you screaming it like that.
The group escapes for a moment and springs a trap on Bondrewd, having him and his umbral hand surrounded by the deadliest monsters in the 5th layer. But then we get another description of Bondrewd when Reg asks how powerful he is. He is described as a monster. He was able to make an insane amount of progress, securing a base in the depths and getting rid of monsters that were fatal to explorers. But on the flip side, he used methods that were unheard of and without consulting others. And in a specific example, when plants and animals obstruct the way to securing a route, he burns them, without any regard for who or what might be in the area. The surrounding environment gets annihilated. Further, Bondrewd is described as a wanted criminal overseas, and that this person has encountered raiders touched by madness, but even Bondrewd is different from that. It was as if some strange, mysterious entity had donned a mask and was masquerading as a human. If there are indeed monsters in the netherworld, things like him would qualify. Reg believes he finally defeated Bondrewd. Prushka, watching it all go down and approach the dead body of her father, starts breaking down into tears. The umbral hand taking care of Prushka walks over and takes the helmet off the dead body and puts it on, revealing that he is in fact the real Bondrewd.
Boy! Listen, Lupe Fiasco had a song where he said, if they can get the mask that he wore on his face, they will put somebody else in his place to restore the faith, the illusion that is safe. The great of being as gas fills the room and rockets destroy everything. Bro, I feel like that song is like this.
More so that he is immortal, and all of the umbral hands are Bondrewd. Leaving with Prushka, and immediately after, we see him marking her body ready to perform an experiment on her. So which one is it? Because everyone that knows of Bondrewd describes him in the worst of ways. Meanwhile, Prushka describes him as a caring, loving father. One of these clearly seems to contradict the other, but the thing is they are both true. At least in Bondrewd's mind. To him, the inhumane experiment and practices aren't done with any ill will or malicious intent. He sees suffering as a necessary part of the process. What matters is progress. So even if he is sawing you in half while you are still awake, if that contributes to the goal of conquering the abyss, then he sees it as an act of love. I might have used the word sadistic to describe Bondrewd in the past. His actions can certainly be seen that way, but he does not derive pleasure from bringing others pain. He derives happiness from accomplishing the goal, even if the progress is...
Why don't you get in the machine then, buddy? That's what I would have said. Listen, reason with me for a minute, okay? You want progress, right? Okay, me personally, I don't really care for progress like that. So if one of us was going to step up to the plate, it should be you. That's what I would, hey, Bondrewd, come on now. Sounds a little bit logical to me, huh?
Isn't made by himself, he is glad. He sees it as a marvelous thing. Even if it's his own death that's being caused, he always remains with a constant politeness, and we never see otherwise. This isn't somebody who understands what they are doing wrong but allows the success to hush his guilt, because he has no guilt at all. He doesn't show remorse or sorrow for his actions, outside of apologizing to Nanachi for jumping the gun and experimenting on Reg. Bondrewd is, as I described earlier, seemingly completely amoral. Not a human being killing another with some sense of morality, but more so like an animal killing another for food. He's without any moral constraint or limitation, and this allows him to view his own actions of ones of love. There is a question, however. What about all of the other children we saw that were in Bondrewd's base? We are then shown a room full of cartridges we heard of earlier. Nanachi explains that the kids were experimented on and are turned into living, suffering, fleshy curse repellent and shoved into containers so that Bondrewd can explore the 6th layer of the abyss. A fight between Bondrewd and Reg breaks out again, and a huge explosion causes them to descend into the lower layer. We see a bunch of hollows crawling around, and Bondrewd begins naming them. Shako, Iten, Sumiko, Puel, they all have names, you see, as the hollows crawl onto Bondrewd. This is what's left of the children who were experimented on like Mitty. When one of the cartridges runs out and the fight continues, he says, My, Resima is finished. She was one of my kind-hearted masterpieces. She dreamed of becoming a princess, you know. Isn't that cute? So not only does he remember each of his victims by name, but also their hopes and dreams, further showing that he believes all that he is doing has been out of care. The fight continues, and all of the cartridges run out, giving Bondrewd a similar transformation to Nanachi, which he refers to as a blessing, because in his mind, a curse or a blessing might as well be the same thing. As the cartridges shoot out, he continues to name them one by one. Takiri, Terethia, Nopero, and the final cartridge shoots out, and Mania, Prushka's pet, runs out and licks the liquid spilling from the cartridge. Ah, it was truly a marvelous adventure, was it not, Prushka? To really drive the heartbreak of this moment further, we are given an extensive flashback into Bondrewd taking care of and raising Prushka, helping recover her mind from the harm of the abyss, giving her a name, and giving her mania, and doing all he can to make sure she is okay and happy. In the flashback, he seems like an outstanding father, to the point that when she believes he was killed, she mourns for him, and even in her current state as fleshy fuel, she wishes to overcome anything together, only wishing to go on adventures together one day. This is what really makes Bondrewd a unique type of evil, because oftentimes we hear that villains believe what they are doing is the right thing.
True.
That isn't always the case, but often for the morally gray antagonist it is so. Him using himself to further advance is an act of self-love. Him using someone else in the way he seems fit is an individual act of love regardless of the greater good. He is the so-called sovereign of the dawn, and so he has control over everything in his sight, and so he has no need to be held down by morality. As long as progress is being made, that's all that matters.
This is an interesting conversation to have, all right?
Hell,
Is progress more important than maintaining the line between good and bad or good and evil? Which one is more important?
even once he is defeated, he shall...
Because some people will argue that progress is needed even if you got to do a little bad to do it. You know what I'm saying? You watched the movie Avatar. What's another movie they did that where, like, we got to do this thing because it's going to be better for everybody. And once you start to justify that, the ending is Bondrewd with no moral compass, progress only, right?
Shows no qualms about it and simply states that now his aspiration is to see Reg, Riko, and Nanachi succeed, all in the name of progress. Prushka in her final moments then turns into a white whistle for Riko to use, which could be argued as part of Bondrewd's plan all along. Considering that he always seemed to be a couple hundred steps ahead, I wouldn't put it past him. Still, one thing is to see your test subjects as nothing, and another is to derive a sick, twisted pleasure from their suffering, but it is an entirely different kind of twisted to see each of them as your beloved children, and that the one that you personally raised as your closest child, and yet you can still mutilate them and have them either live forever as a hollow, or live as fleshy fuel until they expire. It's incomprehensibly evil how someone could be capable of this. Now, is he worse than Griffith like I put in the thumbnail? It's debatable, but you clicked on the video and watched, so once again, all in the name of progress. Someone who at some point might have had some sense of morality, although we're never really told that, but was lost throughout the transferring of his soul from one body to another. But how could someone have such a detached view of the horrors he commits on others and love, be it someone he just met or his own daughter? Well, as Bondrewd says, a prayer cannot be born from one who only knows of joy.
That is such a fire quote. Oh my goodness.
A prayer
cannot be born from one who only knows of joy. Who knows only of joy. What? You have to know pain for it to be considered a prayer answered to you or a prayer born for you. You have to know pain. Because if you only know joy, it's just more of the same. Boy, listen, what is this called? The Abyss, Made in the Abyss? I'm watching this, all right? Literally right when I cut this off, while I'm editing it and eating my lunch, guess what I'm loading up? Hey, shout out to my man. Who is this? I got to give him his proper, The Masked Man. We got to hit that sub button. This was a banger. But y'all like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. And I'm going to see y'all in the next vid. Peace.
So when the metal hit his mug, he just sunk in place. 100K Holla, chillin' Bahamas. Come home to your crib and throw in your mama.